Hello, everybody. My name is Gjermund Sæther. I'm a director in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Oslo, Norway. Welcome to this digital briefing about the African-Nordic Initiative at the UN, the status of the initiative in light of COVID-19 and possible way forward. We have been planning this briefing for all embassies accredited to Oslo for some time. Of course, COVID-19 changed a lot. In a way, this digital platform gives us better opportunities to reach out because African embassies accredited to Oslo are not only in Oslo, in Copenhagen and Stockholm, they are also in Berlin and London. So in a way, this new and digital world that we are all trying to master in this spring is providing some opportunities. Before we start off with State Secretary Marianne Hagen, I would like to give some technical information. For those of you who attended the digital briefing with the Foreign Minister on May 18, you will know the format. We don't have an interactive platform. As you have seen from the invitation, we have this live streaming, and African embassies accredited to Oslo can put forward their questions in writing on an email address qanda@mfa.no. And then we have already received some questions and comments. We are very pleased about that. And I will read those questions and comments. And when there are questions, then the State Secretary will answer. So during the meeting, please feel free to put forward your questions. As I said, we are very happy that we already have some questions and comments. So then after the State Secretary has given her remarks, there will be short introductions from Copenhagen, Stockholm, and Helsinki as well, because this Nordic African Initiative is very much something we do together, both in the Nordic region and on the African continent. So then it's my pleasure to introduce State Secretary in some governments one also use the title Deputy Minister, but in our system we use State Secretary. Marianne Hagen, please, the floor is yours.
Dear Excellencies, dear Nordic colleagues, thank you for attending this video event concerning the African-Nordic Initiative at the UN. In light of the changes brought forward by COVID-19, we believe an update on the initiative would be timely. I trust you all got the background information about the initiative we sent out on Friday, May 29th. I will also use this occasion to give you an update on how we are responding to the COVID-19 pandemic. In these unusual times, we had to think creatively about ways of meeting and communicating. I'm therefore happy to see that we can maintain our dialogue through digital events like these. Let me first convey my sympathy and solidarity with you and your respective countries, and appreciations of your efforts to contain further spread of the pandemic. The COVID-19 pandemic knows no borders and has had a dramatic impact on all sectors. And since we are all in this together, we need a coordinated effort in the spirit of multilateralism. Global threats require global responses, and a united global response will need a strong UN at its center. I'm very pleased that the Secretary General's COVID-19 response and recovery fund is now a reality. We work closely with the UN to establish it. The fund aims to assist countries in their recovery and building more resilient health systems in close collaboration with the World Health Organization. We are very pleased that 16 African countries received support in the first round, and we will support inclusion of more in the next round. Norway fully supports the WHO and its leadership by Dr. Tedros. Only the WHO can play the global leading role in ensuring a well-coordinated and effective response. Of course, there will be lessons learned for the WHO, as there will for all of us. Excellencies, the current global challenges underlines the importance of initiatives such as the African-Nordic Initiative at the UN. It shows the need to strengthen multilateral cooperation and the rules-based world order. The African and Nordic countries share a common interest in maintaining a well-functioning UN-led international system. Through strengthening the dialogue between our countries and joining forces, we can show a united front in support of multilateralism. Norway has friendships with many African countries that go way back to the struggle for decolonization and for independence. In the past decades, these relations have further expanded, among other things, through increased political dialogue. The African-Nordic Initiative deepens our political partnerships with African countries beyond traditional development cooperation. We welcome this opportunity to strengthen the dialogue, both between our colleagues in New York, between our ministers, and between colleagues in our capitals. Since launching the African-Nordic Initiative in the UN in New York in the spring of 2019, we have received a lot of constructive input from African countries. This includes bilateral meetings at last year's UNGA and the discussion at the African-Nordic Foreign Ministers meeting in November in Tanzania. We have also had fruitful consultations in New York and in Addis Ababa. An African core group has been established for the initiative in New York, whose members were selected by the African group. These are Algeria, Cameroon, Cape Verde, Djibouti, Egypt, Guinea, Lesotho, Morocco, Nigeria, Rwanda, Senegal, and Zimbabwe. The Nordic countries and the core group have together identified a non-exhaustive list of priority issues. These are areas where our interests align and the potential for increased cooperation is the greatest. Among the priorities so far identified are the links between peace, security, and sustainable development. The link between the SDGs and the African Agenda 2063, as well as multilateralism as a priority to preserve the ideals of the UN Charter. The list of overall priority issues for the initiative will continue to expand as our dialogue within the initiative develops further. Discussions on this is currently ongoing between our colleagues in New York, and we wish to extend the dialogue also to our capitals. The aim is to elaborate a platform, for example, in the shape of a common statement for intensified cooperation between the African countries and the Nordic countries. As the first major event under the initiative, we organized a workshop on climate-related security and development risks in the Sahel. The event was held in Dakar in the beginning of March with Senegal and Norway as co-hosts. The purpose of the meeting was to deepen our collective understanding of the impact of climate-related human security and development risks, and how multilateral cooperation can contribute to preventing, mitigating, and adapting to these effects. The aim of the meeting was to generate policy recommendations for enhanced multilateral cooperation in this area. The meeting brought together representatives of countries from West Africa, the Sahel, and the Nordic region, with delegates from a number of regional and multilateral organizations and experts from civil society and research institutes. The experiences and the insights from this meeting can be drawn upon in future cooperation between our countries in the field of climate, development, and security. Excellencies, COVID-19 and its impact has consequences for planned activities under this initiative. The meeting in Dakar was meant to be followed by a continental meeting in Addis Ababa in April, with Ethiopia and Norway as co-hosts. This event should have had a broader participation and a broader thematic focus, and was foreseen as an important stepping stone forward towards a possible common statement in support of multilateral cooperation. The event was postponed due to the current circumstances. Nevertheless, we are still planning for the event to be organized later this year or in 2021 with the same broad focus and participation. All African countries will be invited to send one representative to the meeting in Addis Ababa from the respective capitals on senior government official level, and one representative from their UN missions in New York. By bringing together representatives both from our capitals and New York, we hope to build a solid platform for a future dialogue on multilateral issues. The celebration of the 75th anniversary of the United Nations should provide us with another excellent opportunity to identify more precisely how we can work together to protect and reform the rules-based international order. However, it's still unclear in what way the UNGA 75 will be organized. Plans for a meeting or event in the margins of the General Assembly is therefore on hold for the moment while we are exploring the possibilities. The current situation also had consequences for the dialogue on the initiative between the Nordic countries and the core group in New York, with a temporary halt in the meetings. However, the dialogue is currently restarting. A new meeting between the core group and the Nordic countries will happen soon. We are currently exploring how the initiative should be adjusted in order to respond to the crisis, and how to consolidate the initiative as a platform for dialogue and partnership between African and Nordic countries in multilateral settings. In New York, the upcoming meeting with the core group provides an opportunity for our colleagues to have a new look at the state of the initiative and its relevance to the current global situation. This includes the possibility of adding subjects, such as global health and food security, to the list of priority areas for cooperation. We are similarly trying to facilitate a dialogue between our capitals on possible ways forward. To that aim, we welcome input from all Nordic and African countries, whether from representatives based in capitals or stationed at foreign missions. As part of this dialogue, we look forward to answering your questions concerning the initiative, either during the Q&A session following the remarks from the other Nordic colleagues, or by other means or communication in the coming weeks and months. Excellencies, I would like to underline that maintaining the strengthened dialogue gained through the initiative is a long-term Norwegian interest. We will continue to promote the initiative and multilateral dialogue with African countries independently of our candidacy for the UN Security Council. Nevertheless, we hope to pursue the goals and objectives of the initiative as an elected member of the Council. Norway will, if elected, bring a small country perspective to the Security Council, and we will speak with an independent voice. Norway has a long tradition of working closely with African countries and the G77 in all fora at the UN. We have a proven track record of considering each proposal on its own merits. Norway is also a consistent partner to the UN. Our support for the UN is predictable and recognizable, even when our government changes. We are the 7th largest net contributor, and more than 42,000 Norwegians have served in UN-led peacekeeping operations since 1947, and continue to serve in Mali and South Sudan today. Many of the conflicts on the Security Council's agenda concern the African continent. If elected to the Council, Norway will seek even closer cooperation at the UN and around the world. We will strive to be a fair player and listen to the views of all sides. Building on our extensive experience in conflict resolution and peace building, Norway will contribute to finding solutions through pragmatic diplomacy. One important way of doing this is promoting a more representative multilateral system. In order to ensure effective multilateral cooperation, the international order with the UN at its core need to better represent the geopolitical realities of the world today. This means, among other things, that we must right the historical injustice done to the African continent by increasing the number of both permanent and non-permanent seats for Africa in the Security Council. Excellencies, Norway's commitment to solving common problems through international cooperation is who we are and what we do. It is also the core of our COVID-19 response. COVID-19 represents an unprecedented global crisis. The economic impacts of the pandemic will be severe. No country can solve this crisis on its own. Norway strongly supports a coordinated international response to the COVID-19 outbreak through the leadership of the UN and WHO. Let me briefly mention some of our priorities in the global health response. As a founding member of the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations, CEPI, Norway will continue to support the development of an effective vaccine against the coronavirus. The Norwegian government has committed an additional $200 million over the next 10 years to CEPI. We are also supporting the work of Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance. As one of the original 6 Gavi donors, Norway has steadily increased its political and financial support for the alliance and its innovative mechanisms over the last 2 decades. May 5th, our Prime Minister announced a pledge of $1 billion to Gavi's strategic period in 2021 to 2025, including a renewed commitment to the International Finance Facility for Immunization Company until 2030. We firmly believe that once developed, a vaccine must be made globally available and be rapidly and fairly distributed, including to vulnerable groups and low-income countries. We commend the African Union's efforts in promoting a united and coordinated response in Africa. Norway will support the AU and the African Centre for Disease Control and Prevention in order to build national capacities, coordination and distribution of medicines and other equipment, and to mobilize and deploy experts. Norway will continue to take a lead in efforts to solve new cross-border health challenges. Meeting the challenges requires evidence-based decisions that contribute to strengthening health systems, particularly in developing countries, and that are well coordinated across sectors. When supporting the COVID-19 response, we will not neglect other challenges. This includes the need to keep primarily healthcare services broadly operational and to giving special attention to reproductive health services. We know that the pandemic is impacting men and women differently. More women are health workers and caretakers, and women are still overrepresented in the informal sector. We also see that the pandemic is reinforcing pre-existing inequalities, and that women and girls in already vulnerable situations become even more vulnerable. Therefore, we need a gender lens in our COVID-19 response. Both women and men must have access to health services, and to financial incentives must respond to women's situations in the labor market. We must ensure that women participate on an equal footing with men when needs and actions to fight the pandemic are defined. Norway supports WHO's efforts to assist vulnerable countries with weak health systems to help mitigate the long-term consequences of the COVID-19 outbreak, including in African countries. through our humanitarian support for the WHO's Strategic Preparedness and Response Plan. This effort is closely linked to our support for WHO's long-term efforts. And finally, in spite of all good efforts, we are concerned that the COVID-19 pandemic will result in an economic downturn hitting low-income countries particularly hard. It is clear that substantial financing packages will be needed to provide both immediate support and longer-term financing. To this end, Norway has committed funding through the multilateral development banks and IMF. We look forward to continuing the dialogue between our countries on these and other multilateral issues. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, State Secretary Marianne Hagen. Then we will cross over to Stockholm, and I give the floor to Irina Shulgin-Nyoni, Africa Director in the Swedish Ministry for Foreign Affairs. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. It's lovely to see you, although of course it would have been even nicer to meet in person. But I'm so glad that you invited us to join this important meeting. And I'm sorry that I can't see all of you on my screen, but I will imagine you in my head. And some of you, of course, I have also met, because some of you are posted here in Stockholm. But let me just start by then thanking Norway for organizing this, and also to say that you know, I'm not really sure that we actually needed any further reminder or any further examples of how crucial our international collaboration and solidarity are. But of course, COVID-19 has without doubt given us one of those. And I think it is really in this multilateral system that we have built and that we are continue to build together that really offers the platform and the structures that we need to collaborate in solidarity to help and move from words to action and to move from ambition to really necessary changes. And I think this, I think we all see that the result of this pandemic has really proven this to us over and over again. We, as Nordic countries, need this collaboration and solidarity, and I think many of the African countries does as well. And I think this whole idea of putting our values in the sense that we are looking at multilateral work and solidarity and collaboration, that comes first, and that national interests comes maybe second or even further down the line. I think that's really something that very often characterizes the Nordic countries, and I believe also many of you African nations. And this, I might add, is also a very important point when we look at one of the issues that was raised by State Secretary Hagen, which is, of course, the upcoming election to the UN Security Council. And I think that it's fair to say that this is an important issue to now remind ourselves about, since this election is coming very soon. And I think if there's one thing from our experience, which I actually also had firsthand since I was in New York at the time when we were in the Security Council, is really the importance of being able to stand up for these values and to put your national agenda aside, to actually look at the subjects and the important actually values issues on the agenda as number one. And I think having any of the Nordic countries, but now we have Norway, luckily, there I think is a huge strength for the Security Council and for all of us. I also would like to mention that the Nordic countries, as you know, we work a lot together and we're very like-minded in many ways. And I think we have seen now the past couple of months that the dialogue between our ministers and ministries around the COVID response and the call from the Secretary General on building back better and greener, we might want to add, is really, again, quite clear to us that this is the opportunity that we actually have and that we need to also seize. And from my perspective as heading the Africa department, when we have these discussions at the ministry here in Stockholm, I tend to always remind my colleagues that, Africa is the continent where this is going to happen and where we really have all these possibilities and advantages when we look at building back better and greener. So I really hope that we will have a chance to continue this collaboration and work towards that. And when we discuss the strength of the multilateral system, I think we have also seen that the structures and the agendas, we have them already, actually. We have them in our Agenda 2030. We have them in the whole spirit of leaving no one behind. And of course, the Paris Agreement. So I think when we look at really what needs to be done, the changes that we need to get within getting rid of all these inequalities, both within societies and between countries, that is needed for us to come back stronger from this pandemic, I think we can find many of the answers in the Agenda 2030. So there's no need really to invent the wheel again. I would just like to end there, actually, because as I mentioned, since we are so like-minded in the Nordic countries, I don't really have to repeat many of the very strong and important and valid remarks and messages that State Secretary Hagen shared with us. I might just want to end by really underlining the priority that we see to strengthen our dialogue and our collaboration with the African Union. I think we have a lot more to do in that field, and I'm very much looking forward to be able to do that together with you and with your good advice. I think that is something that will be needed when we handle the consequences of this pandemic. So thank you so much, and I'm looking forward to listening to the rest of you today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Irina. Then we will go south to Copenhagen. I will give the floor to Lotte Machon, Africa Director, Danish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The floor is yours, Lotte.
Thank you very much. Thank you, and hello here from Copenhagen. We are very happy to participate in the meeting today, and as we are almost used to, all of us by now, to participate over Skype or Teams, having this social virtual distancing, I must say it never really makes up for being in the same room together. So this is as good as it gets right now, and we're happy to be here, but also looking forward to being together with all of you, as Irina also said. As of course a special thank you to Norway and to State Secretary in Hagen for initiating the meeting today, and just to underline that we are fully behind Norway and Norway's ongoing initiative for also moving into the Security Council. We are right there behind you, and do see sort of our strong Nordic collaboration as something to continue to strive for. We really welcome the Nordic Africa Initiative. We believe it's timely and it's welcome to as a way of further developing and bolstering a sustainable African-Nordic partnership on multilateral issue. Denmark is truly a strong multilateralist, as I believe all the Nordic countries are. It is in our own national interest. It's in our DNA to work together and to work through the UN and with like-minded partners for our common destiny. And indeed, both the United Nations, the Nordics, and Africa is at the core of Danish foreign policy and Danish development policy. We simply believe that the Nordic countries and the African countries, we share destiny. We have this long and historic and political ties on all fronts. And at a time where the rule-based order is under pressure, it's really time for us to remind ourselves of how much we have in common and do aim as much as we can to pull in the same direction. I believe this has played out also during the COVID-19, where indeed, as Rina also mentioned, and State Secretary Hagen has said, the Nordic ministers has really come together during the crisis. And I know that the Danish development minister and foreign minister has reached out to several African colleagues also checking in on how we could collaborate through the difficult crisis that all of countries have faced. So looking at the COVID-19 is if anything underscoring the need to work together and accept that even if we are apart at the moment due to the closing down of our countries, we are still there together sharing our future. On the initiative, we do believe that over the last year it has really come into shape. We applaud it as a common platform to move ahead with shared priorities. It's a welcome move to have identified co-leads of the initiative that we could have on a sort of rotating basis annually, biannually. We believe, and that's maybe my second point, sort of on the more concrete, that there really is value in being concrete and identifying subjects or items that are relevant both in New York and in country and even in the African Union and find and shape these agendas and move forward. Two work streams that we believe that is super relevant to be focusing on is one could be the climate-related security and development with youth and a gender equality lens. As has been said, I mean, after the COVID-19 comes an opportunity to build back better and greener, and this could indeed be a sort of a shared agenda to work from. And I believe, as others have said, that the SDGs are there, they are defining our framework, but we also know that a lot of sort of translation, a lot of sort of hammering out of the details still needs to be done to translate words into concrete action on the ground. On that note, I should also say that it's welcome that we already see non-papers circulated on specific issues within the Nordic African initiatives. It has also been mentioned, and I would just like to say that we supported that we should use other existing vehicles for moving our initiative forward, and that could indeed be the Nordic African Foreign Ministers Forum that is actually working in a way that we think could also cross-benefit what's going on here. Let me just say, sort of in closing, because I think I already took more time than I should, that also to remind ourselves that the 2020 is certainly also a pivotal year for the EU-African relationship, that the EU is also coming together with a strong sort of Team Europe response, and some of the lessons there can sort of be lifted into our Nordic African work as well. In closing, let me just say that we, Denmark, from the Danish side, have committed around 120 million euros to 2 aid packages in helping especially the our African partner countries respond to the crisis. I'll not dwell what it has into details, but it has spanned from the immediate health crisis to the socioeconomic consequences that we do indeed see more and more firmly now in all the countries that we are working with, and it has been going through both humanitarian channels, but also the new UN multilateral or multi-partner trust fund, and then specifically through, for example, social safety nets in countries, but working through multilateral partners, working with our African partners, working together with our Nordic countries to do exactly what this initiative is about, moving together towards a shared and common future, and using every opportunity there is to strengthen our partnership and our cooperation. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you so much, Lotta. Then we will go eastwards to Helsinki. I will now give the floor to Martti Airola, Senior Advisor, Finnish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Please, Martti, go ahead.
Thank you very much, and very good afternoon from Helsinki as well. Let me start by thanking you, Norway, for organizing this meeting, and State Secretary Hagen for your update you gave. Let me also commend Norway for inviting our African partners. In the time of crisis like now, it's even more important to keep in touch, have dialogue, and listen each other, even virtually as today. The crisis indeed, as we have seen, highlights the relevance of the UN initiative in terms of protecting, supporting, and strengthening our multilateral system. It's good to see also that the pandemic has enhanced multilateralism in Africa, namely regarding the African Union via the active role of the CDC in particular, not forgetting regional economic communities and other actors either. We think multilateralism at the UN and the AU and in Africa is a must, not only for the pandemic per se, but even more for the severe consequences of the pandemic, including economic, social, political, security, and governance aspects. And food security, very crucial, as well as links with climate change that we discussed in Dakar in March, just before the borders started to close. Concerning multilateralism at the UN and the AU, we also hope that we could see more collaboration within the systems, inside the organizations. Things like joint task forces and coordination groups across institutional lines to get out from silos. In fact, this is something we are very heavily discussing also at the moment in Finland, the question of how to get out from silos. Climate change, as it was mentioned, could be one potential area for closer Nordic-African partnership, including the Building Back Better and Greener initiative Finland very strongly supports. Let's keep this kind of points and what was mentioned before in mind when the UN initiative moves on. In that regard and more, Finland also looks forward to seeing Norway in the UN Security Council. Regarding Finland, our financial support to global actions responding to the pandemic is in total this year about 40 million euros. It includes support to the WHO, UNHCR, medical research, and so on, and also bilateral help to our partner countries. We are also very committed and fully committed to the Team Europe concept of the European Union. Finally, I'm pleased to inform you that Finland is in the process of drafting a national Africa strategy, hopefully by the end of this year. And to that end, after the summer, we hope and we are planning to approach also African ambassadors accredited to Helsinki. Let me also wish you, before ending, a very warm and nice Nordic summer. The pandemic is not over yet, so stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marty, and thank you for some good reminders at the end there. The COVID-19 is certainly not over, and we have to stay safe. Let me just give a reminder about the email address for questions. Everybody has it in their invitation. It's QANDA@mfa.no. We have some comments and questions already. I will start by reading two comments. The first is from Ambassador Deriba in Stockholm. That's the ambassador of Ethiopia. Her comments read as following. Excellencies, thank you very much for arranging this webinar meeting. Excellencies, because of unprecedented and extraordinary challenges the world has faced over the last 4 months, there was no suitable time to conduct the African-Nordic Initiative meeting in April as per our plan. Hoping that the current situation of the pandemic will be gradually changing, as a co-host, Ethiopia is looking forward to play its part in organizing the meeting. I would also like to inform that as a co-host, our head office is also working hard to ensure the practicality of the meeting. Thank you. Yes, thank you very much for that good comment, Ambassador Deriba, and for your readiness and willingness to work together with us on this initiative. And as the State Secretary said, the physical meeting we are planning in Addis Ababa together with Ethiopia is only put on hold. We will have it, but we are not quite sure due to the corona pandemic. The next comment is also from a Stockholm-based ambassador. That's Ambassador Christina, Ambassador of Rwanda. Her comment read as follows. Thank you, Honorable State Secretary Marianne Hagen, for organizing this important briefing on the African-Nordic Initiative at the UN. I wish to start by expressing our appreciation to you and to the Norwegian government for the excellent bilateral relations between our both countries, Norway and Rwanda, and reiterate our will to even further increase and broaden the scope of our cooperation. The international community is facing a series of challenges that can only be overcome collectively, like climate change, terrorism, digital hazards, and currently the COVID-19 pandemic. At the same time, multilateral cooperation and a rule-based international order are increasingly under threat. In this context, Rwanda is committed to play a constructive role through contributing to strengthening existing multilateral institutions, but also through active participation in alternative platforms. That is why we welcome and support the African-Nordic Initiative, as it provides an opportunity to have frank, open, and genuine conversations on various topics of common interest and to focus on the priority issues jointly agreed upon. The initiative will ultimately allow both our regions to coordinate positions on the said issues at the United Nations. Rwanda is a member of the core group in New York, and we are ready and willing to continue the constructive dialogue in a win-win setting. Thank you, Ambassador Christina of Rwanda. Then we have the first question. Again, it comes from Stockholm. Very good. That is from the Ambassador of Tanzania, Ambassador Slaa. So the question from Ambassador Slaa of Tanzania read as follows. The world community has for years become a global village dependent on multilateralism for global security, peace, international trade, solidarity, and general well-being of mankind. However, in recent years, we have witnessed alarming trends of unilateralism on the global scene. What strategies does Norway and the Nordic partners, through mechanisms such as the African-Nordic Foreign Ministers meeting, have to safeguard the significant global achievements made over the years? And I will now give the floor to State Secretary Hagen.
Thank you, and thank you, Your Excellency, Ambassador Slaa. I agree with your assessment. The rules-based international cooperation is under pressure, and the preference for bilateral or unilateral solutions over multilateral solutions is worrying. It's therefore time to mobilize all good forces to defend and strengthen the multilateral system. The Norwegian government has recently presented its strategy for this through a new white paper on multilateralism. Reform and partnerships are two key aspects of our strategy. We must give priority to strengthening the institutions that matter the most to our security, economy, and welfare. We must defend what we have rather than developing new competing organizations. And we also need to intensify our partnerships with countries in Africa, Asia, Latin America, Alliances with representative and diverse countries from all regions will have a better chance of success. In addition to the African-Nordic Initiative, we've been working closely with Germany under the G20 initiative, Compact with Africa, to cooperate with selected African countries. The AU is an essential building block of the international order and has a key role to play in promoting peace, security, and sustainable development. And the AU-UN partnership is of particular importance and is the most developed of the partnerships between the UN and regional organizations. We are interested in promoting and supporting this partnership as much as we can, and the establishment of a group of friends, both in Addis Ababa and in New York, is the result of this interest. I also want to mention that we are also a part of the Alliance for Multilateralism, spearheaded by Germany and France. Thank you for your question, Ambassador.
Yeah, thank you very much, State Secretary Hagen. Then we will go to Berlin, to the Ambassador of Mali, His Excellency Umu Salshek. He has 2 questions, and I appreciate very much that his staff translated it to English. Je suis désolé, je parle très mauvais français. I will therefore read the first question in English, and then we take the second question afterwards. So the ambassador of Mali in Berlin, accredited to Oslo, he asked the following. Faced with a negative impact on the economy of your respective countries about COVID-19, do you think that diplomatic relations will go on a decline? If not, what recovery strategy do you plan with Africa in the medium and short term? Please, State Secretary Hagen.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your question. We see that the COVID-19 has had a significant negative impact on the economy of Norway. We do not foresee any decline in diplomatic activity in African countries. On the contrary, the COVID-19 also shows how interlinked the world is, and we must face global challenges together. And that is what the African-Nordic Multilateral Initiative is all about.
Yes. Thank you, State Secretary. And then we go to the second question from the ambassador in Mali. We go to the second question of the ambassador of Mali residing in Berlin, accredited to Oslo. The question reads as follows. To your understanding, what responses do you think about in support of Africa to reduce the harmful consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic on your diplomatic relations with Africa?
Thank you again, Your Excellency. Our response to COVID-19 in our diplomatic relation with African countries will consist of the following. Political dialogue and cooperation, as this meeting today. African countries are a top priority in our development assistance, and we're also directing even more funding to the health sector in African countries through mechanisms like Gavi. We're also a strong supporter of the WHO, and we will work with the African countries in supporting WHO. The economic slowdown in Africa is already having serious negative consequences. Through debt relief and development aid, we will provide support. Investment is key, and the Nordic African Business Summit, which is organized in Oslo every year, is a key event in making a case for more investments in Africa. Investments lead to job creation. This year's Business Summit will be a digital meeting, and there will be online investor rooms. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, State Secretary Hagen. And again, thank you very much to Her Excellency Umu Salshek, Ambassador of Mali in Berlin, for very good questions. We appreciate that. And as the State Secretary said towards the end of her answer, we now have an opportunity to do some advertisement for the Nordic Africa Business Summit, 8th of October. It's going to be all digital event. I'm sure that many of the ambassadors accredited to Oslo know Eivind Fjelstad in NABA, and he's already very busy trying to figure out how to create a digital successful event. There are no further questions or comments as we have seen by now. So then I think we can round off in time. And first of all, thank you very much to State Secretary Hagen. We are very pleased that you could come here and give this brief for all African embassies accredited to Oslo. And of course, thank you so much to all the embassies that have been watching us. We look forward to see you in Oslo in person whenever you can. It is still a bit tricky, but we will stay in touch. And to our Nordic friends, thank you again so much for your interventions and your support. And we look forward to continue to work on the African-Nordic Initiative at the UN as the year progresses. And hopefully we will be able to get together a physical setting as soon as possible. So thank you very much.
Thank you all.